Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to round two of the Simufur Silver Championship. You join us here at the wonderful track of Suzuka Circuit, home of the Japanese Grand Prix for many years to come and many years prior. We have our grid once again filling up with the Ferraris, Porsches, BMWs, and manufacturers galore, all competing to try to take that top spot once again. And we continue our story from round one, where TGR is going to try to continue their dominance over this series.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think we might see some degradation, high degradation on the Ferraris today. There's been reports, at least in the chat, that they're maybe chewing through their tires a little bit too quickly. So it's certainly going to be an interesting race.
Yeah, we see quite a few things that actually came out of last race. We saw almost all of the Ferraris struggle with their tires through that Donington race. We've also heard reports of the Porsches and not being the strongest, and Suzuka is going to be a very hard track on tires. So that'll be something that we're going to be looking out for through this session as we currently are on board, or actually trailing with Anka as we get through this practice session. Only a 10-minute practice for these drivers as we join each session. So not a lot of time for these drivers to get up to speed. The only real prep that they're going to have is going to be the prep that they practice for the week leading up to this. Otherwise, it's just grit and go, and best of luck. But my name is Plasma. I'm here with my co-commentator FezzFox, and we welcome you to round two once again, and we hope you enjoy your stay.
Yep, and if I have set the settings to this track correctly, it'll be quite hot.
Well, there's not a Simufur race without it either being raining when it's not supposed to, dry when it's not supposed to, or absurdly hot. But according to my weather right now, we're sitting at 31 degrees, track temp, 25 air. So could be a little bit hotter. Definitely is going to increase once we get some laps down. But we are also on a fast track, which is going to see quite a bit of degradation. And also going to maybe throw some of these drivers off during free practice as they're getting used to the track, getting to the grips of things. So they're going to be struggling with a little bit less traction. And then once they roll into qualifying, I imagine partway through, we're going to see it switch over to optimum, and some of these drivers are going to not be ready for that.
One of the traits of Suzuka, I think, it always starts on a fast track. It never goes optimum quickly. And it takes a long time to get up there. That'll definitely hurt the tires in the first round, the first stint, should I say?
Yeah, it would be something to keep in mind of the qualifying. Or imagine coming in. It's gonna be maybe something like a green track, where it's gonna be whoever's out on track last is likely gonna have the biggest advantage. As we're jumping in here, Anka, our P2, or actually our pole setter from last race, I believe they finished P4 or 5, I want to say. I'd have to check the results one more time on that. It was rolling through, but P6, a little bit off the pace from what we saw of them last week, where they ended up dominating that whole position battle, and Denak had to actually settle for a second and finish that race out on track. It'll be interesting to see how Honka recovers. Maybe just a slow start. That set could be built for the optimum conditions, and it's just not taking the fast conditions well. But one thing to keep our eyes on as we progress through this session.
Yeah, Suzuka obviously requires full commitment. Turn one, you need to really trust the car is going to turn in when you're at full speed. Again, 130R, you need to really have the car beneath you before you turn into that corner. Any kind of looseness at the back, you're just going to lose it. Go straight into the wall, and that'll be your race done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be relatively tricky for any of these drivers. And you want to run low wing here because of the fact there's so many long corners and big long straights that you gain a ton of time on. But oh, speaking of, immediately we can see that bite Anka in the back. But there's one other thing to add on is actually believe what caused that is the curbs here are rather aggressive. And one thing we saw last week was the curbs at Donington. I believe it was primarily the sausage curb through the S's. But the curbs at Donington were actually what were causing the big drops in times that we saw at the Ferrari. The Ferrari still isn't the nicest car on tires, but it was causing punctures, and I believe all cars but this driver, Suzuka, the only driver that at least post-race in the Ferrari didn't report that they had some kind of tire woes or puncture that came through that race.
It's just kind of Suzuka kind of reminds me of Donington in the way you have to ride the curbs through the Degners. First Degner, just kind of a little clip. The second Degner, you really need to be riding all of that curb, as well as then the final chicane too. That needs to be full, just climbing over the curbs like your life depends on it, just like we see now.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, too, you want to be careful. You want to likely straddle them. You don't want to rest the middle of your tire on the outside edge of a serrated curb because that's how you're going to start causing those punctures. Especially if you're at low tire pressure, it's going to be seeing it start to rip through the tire, as well as hitting a sausage curb is very detrimental. But coming through the Casino Square section, for example, there's two very big curbs that you have to take a lot of to actually extract the lap time out of the car. But it's all about risk reward. I'm sure we're going to see some of the Ferraris this week be a little bit more tentative after they learned a bit last week. But all in all, we're all learning in this together. So the silver drivers are kind of guinea pigs this week yet again. It's showing us the way that the 1.9 is working, and I would rather them than me, so I don't have to find out the hard way. But they definitely have put everything out on the table and taken the adventurous route for sure.
Yep, and strangely enough, actually, also Suzuka will actually be quite heavy on the track limits as well. Just coming through the Degners, the exit of Degner 2 can catch you out. If you just go a little bit wide, that'll be a warning for track limits, as well as the exit of Spoon as well. That's another one that you just need to be really careful of. Maybe not too bad in a 1 hour race, but in the endurance races, you really need to look out for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the talk of Degner 2 also brings up if you drag yourself a little bit wide on entry there, that wall on the outside, the exit of Degner 2, that comes up really fast. And we talked about how that was a very high commitment corner through Degner 1 and setting up Degner 2. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if we saw someone getting a lot of pressure, pushing a little bit wide there and struggling to get the car stopped. And that gravel trap needing to do some kind of work. But another car that we popping in here, Wushel taking P2. Wushel was dealing with some struggles, I believe, qualifying P9 last week, finishing up in I think P6 or 7, sitting in P2 right now with a very respectable 2-minute 3 flat, chasing down Suzuka, who very amply is very strong this week at a 2-minute 2.3, and Denak squeezing around one of the final times with a 2-minute 2.4. So it is not business as usual. The grid is quite shaken up, actually. Top 5, all drivers that were not there last week. So it's going to be very interesting. Blaze Pine, another one of our drivers coming in this week that was not able to make last week, filling in with Mercedes in their classic wine and gold livery as they roll through the final corners. Good to see some of our other drivers starting to get back into the series, as well as those that have returned from last week. And hopefully we can get a few more people in here and see a couple more fresh faces as we progress through this championship.
Yep, I think if you offered Wichelle a P3 this time yesterday, she probably would have took it. So yeah, I think if she can keep up that pace, then that'll be done. Only ended up there 1/10 behind Suzuka at the end. So yeah, not too bad on the pace from Wichelle. In the 911, she seems to be having a little bit of a struggle with at the moment.
Yeah, I've talked to Wishel, and they seem to be struggling with the same thing that I do with that car. And while it is a very fun car, and at the heart of it, it is still a Porsche. There's a lot of things with the 992 that actually almost contradict the 991.2. It tends to struggle a lot more mid corner, which is really the 9912's strength. And 992, that's probably the weakest part of the car, if I had to be completely honest. Additionally, the 992 is extremely strong in corner entry, which will actually help out quite a bit as we roll through the earlier phases of the corner here at Suzuka. But that first sector is going to be painful in the 992 unless you have it set up extremely on edge and just force the car to rotate. But now we see the car starting to roll out on track. The very first car's out, and I believe it is Kestrel rolling out first, as we're going to see them take this Ferrari for a ride. Warming up those tires, they're going to be trying to soak in as much heat as possible. Much like 1.8, it's going to be about 3 laps till these tires are fully in their window. I would say around maybe less than that at Suzuka. But 1.9 tire warm-up, even more important than it has been in previous seasons. Talking with many of the drivers and experience with myself, tire warm-up is a much bigger issue. It's very, very hard to get the tires in the window. I don't know how much you've been driving this patch or how much you've experienced that, but what would you say to these drivers that are struggling to get those tires working?
Yeah, for me, it was front tire temperatures. It was just really hard to get the core temperatures up. You get them heated up, and then halfway through the lap, they're just cold again. Closing the brake ducts, say there overheats them, or your brakes start overheating. Add a little bit of camber, take a little bit of toe out, just something to try and get the fronts working. The rears, I don't think, are too bad. It's definitely going to be the fronts that are going to be the killer today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that's probably going to be the biggest point of focus for the Porsche drivers. Just trying to get those front tire temps to get the mid-corner grip. So it'll be extremely important as we roll into things. We're going to jump in as we see a team of Ferraris rolling through the first sector. We're going to go ahead, take a jump on board, and take you through a lap here of the Suzuka circuit as we set things up through Casino Square, the final corner. This run not super important, just make sure you maintain good speed. And the very long downhill pitch straight, we're going to see plenty of opportunities coming into turn 1 here. Famous scene of Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso into 1 with the long sweeper, very low brake pressure for a long period of time. Just throw the car in and maintain that speed. Kestrel seeming to put that together quite well as you throw it in hard into 1. Let the car settle itself down through the second S and then tip it back in, throw it hard to the left. The car always wanting to understeer here out tight to the inside curb. Little bit of understeer as we throw it through the right one more time, and then a high commitment left-hander of Dunlop curve. Full commitment, flat out. It feels like the car is going to drag itself out, and you have to stay planted. Degner 1, throw it in all over that inside curb. Let it track out. Degner 2, early on the brakes, get it in early power. Let it track all the ways out. Use all of that curb. Avoid that track limit, and then the hard braking at the hairpin. Early braking, try to get the car thrown into the inside. Use all of that camber tight. Use a lot of throttle to get the car rotated, and then you have a very long section as we take the run up to Spoon. If you don't have tire temperatures, this can actually manage to be a corner if you're struggling with grip, but should be quite easy from these qualifying loads as we're going to come in nice and late, hard on the brakes, tip it in for a late apex and Spoon. Don't go too wide too early though, because you need to set up the exit here. Early power, tricky acceleration zone. The Ferrari seeming to put it down quite nicely in 1 more straight as we get on the run to the famous 130R. Some cars able to take this flat, but it's a very scary flat corner if you're able to do so, as Kestrel puts it together quite nicely, and then hard onto the brakes, Casino Square. All of the curb, we talked about this earlier, a little bit wide from Kestrel, but able to set up that second apex decently well, and then hug the tight inside line here. Shortest run to the line. Kestrel's going to be running it to the line, and our benchmark time is going to be a 2:07. So decent time from Kestrel for that first run out. We're going to see how everyone else files out to try to meet that, as track temperatures or track conditions have gone optimum for this qualifying session. So this is going to be a full sprint session as we see who truly has gotten to grips the best with Suzuka circuit.
Yep, very tight out there from Kestrel. Looks like Danak behind, didn't quite throw it together. Didn't get a time on the board, but Suzuka just jumps in there behind with a 2:01.6. So yeah, that's pretty good pace from Kestrel. Hopefully, we get a few people here closer to that towards the end of qualifying.
I imagine we would. I think Kestrel's been spending a lot of time after talking with them privately, that spending and getting those tires working and actually understanding the tire model, especially after their escapades in Donington, they were trying to understand what they were doing wrong and improve that. And I think they've definitely gotten to grips that, all right, we need to work a little bit with the tires, get the warm up going, and make sure we get things in the right window. And I mean, it's 8 tenths in the first lap of qualifying. I think that just proves that they've started to rein in their understanding of 1.9 and these new tires. That's akin to what we saw Denak do on lap 2 of the race when he was able to get those tires fired up right away and absolutely run away from the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle just chopping up there in the third with two flat pretty much. And then we're riding on board here with Paula, the new entry into the thing. Goes a little bit deep into the hairpin there and just goes wide into the wall. Unfortunately, you have to return to pits, get that car repaired, and then we'll fly on board with Deeds.
Yeah, a little bit of probably side damage done to that Mercedes, but see Deeds flying through here, holding a tight inside line in the run up the spoon. If your car can handle it, it's actually the better line, and just to get the shorter run. It looks decently put together through spoon, maybe a little bit tentative through the second section. Early power should help out. No,
Oh, yeah,
actually, Deeds is on a slow lap. Yeah, indicator on there, and the timing tables would be supporting that. Yeah, it was actually invalidated their lap earlier than when we came on board, but Wishel throwing it in ahead of them, looking like they're setting up a decent lap themselves.
So Kestrel did just improve, but I think it was only about 1/10 maybe. There was slight improvement there from Kestrel, I think.
Yeah, we're on track as well. Wishel looking for an improvement according to my timing screens. Looks like improving on both the first and second sector, but is it going to be an improvement on the lap? It's going to be almost a dead heat, I believe. They did a 2-minute 2 flat last lap, and they did a 2 minute 2 seconds and 2 thousandths last lap, and 2 minute 2 and 22 thousandths this lap. I can't say consistency isn't there, but Bushel not improving regardless. But one driver that is improving, big improvement, coming in from Anka, actually 5/10 of a second up on their first 2 sectors here. So Anka is going to be tipping it in through spoon, them second to last real chance to gain a lot of time, and it looks like a little bit tentative, not dragging the car all the ways out, but a decent exit can make up for that. It's not the most important thing to get the best entry. It's all about the exit, because this run to 130R is painfully long. It feels like it goes on forever, especially if you get a bad exit. But Anke looks like able to piece together decently well. Decent commitment rolling through that final corner. And we're going to be taking a trip through Casino, all the curb. Yeah, Anka very confident. That Ferrari very compliant over the curbs and a decent exit out. But what's it going to be for Anka? We know it was 5/10 of a second of an improvement as Kesher goes by and improves by a 10th or a 100th of a second. But Anka is going to jump up to P2 with a 2-minute 1.1. So there's those tires coming in, starting to eke a little bit closer. And I think now we're starting to see those times get taken directly to Kestrel.
Yeah, looked like a little bit of time left on the table there from Anka through 130R on the exit. Just ran a little bit too tight. Didn't let the car run out over the curves, get a little bit of extra time, and then again on the final corner, it was just a little bit too wide, not cutting that line tight like Wichel's doing here, just to get that time a little bit 10th or 2 down.
Yeah, absolutely. He's gonna be a big improvement actually in the first sector from Kestrel. To report on them really quick, they are currently up by 6/10 of a second. So whatever Kestrel's doing, it wasn't just tires. I think now they're starting to get in the window themselves. This could be a very bad omen for everyone else if Kestrel can piece this lap together. Again, Spoon, very tricky corner, can be an easy place to throw away the lap. A lot of commitment, all of the curve coming from Kestrel, but it's all about, again, the power. Can you put it down nicely and get a good run out? It looks very well put together. No instability coming in from that Ferrari, and it is flying right now.
Yep, this is very good times if they manage to make this stick. They're looking at a 2 flat 0.1, and that would be fringing on pro territory, and he doesn't validate it, so that will not count. And then, yep, just to pour salt into the wounds there, runs a little bit wide at Casino Triangle anyway. But yeah, the Denac, the one we probably expected to take pole, considering how much they ran away with it last week, it seems to be struggling a little bit here.
Yeah, he's definitely not gotten to grips. But jump back real quick with Kestra one more time too. When they invalidated their lap, they were up by 0.8 of a second. I had gotten. That's a lot of time that Kestra was about to throw down. Like a 1 minute 59 here at Suzuka. I mean, I've spent a little bit of time running hot laps, just getting some practice and get some grips with what these drivers are dealing with. I mean, right now they're on pace with what I was running. Admittedly, I was in much hotter conditions in the 39s, but oh my, Kestrel is absolutely soaring and a massive step up from what we saw them running last week. So I really want to keep eyes on them as we run through these couple of sessions, but they're not the only one improving. We also have a couple more improvements down the grid. Pat Circle, Randomy, Paula Brady, and Blazepine all improving on their laps. As soon as I say that, I just watched, I think, Blaze drop their time, but it's tricky out there. Suzuka, we talked about very high commitment circuit. If you really get that commitment right, it's very, very easy to gain a lot of time, but at the same time, it's just as easy to throw it away. A lot of time to be gained on such a technical and such a challenging circuit, and also very, very easy to throw all your progress away, just like we saw Kestra run last time through 130R. Would have been a world-beating lap, but now we got to go again and try to see if we can just match it at best.
Yep, Suzuka giveth and Suzuka taketh away. And definitely just commitment all around. Just needs to be on it. Just as he goes, Kestrel, I think again has just invalidated the lap, running a little bit wide at 130R there. So this will be another lap that just doesn't count. And they're looking about ready to match their time anyway, so it wasn't much of an improvement. Tires maybe going off there. Maybe need to get a new set of boots on that before they try again.
Yeah, Randomy also coming around here with quite a significant improvement. Don't know how far we'll jump them up, but it is quite a significant improvement. Take the shortest line here, run to the line. Randomy driver was able to make week 1, came into week 2, and is looking decently strong, but they've only had a couple days of practice, and so putting it right up to P9 with only, I believe it was 2 days of practice that they've been able to put in, already a decent start, but still. You got 7 minutes of practice or qualifying to go, so we have plenty of opportunity to make an improvement. I want to take a quick look at the sectors as we let the rest of these drivers kind of file themselves out, look for those time improvements. Kestrel currently owns all 3 best sectors, and I think what really stands out to me is their Sector 1 and their Sector 3. Both of which they are over 0.2 of a second faster than the fastest sector set by anyone else on the grid. Sector 1, they've set a 40.292. The next best sector is a 40.562. As well as Sector 3, a sector where it's a little bit less downforce oriented. You actually want the car to be trimmed out. Well, they are a further 0.2 faster through there with a sector of a 26.527. Next is a 26.687. So Kestrel has the best of both worlds. The compliance through the first sector, through the S's, where it's really, really tricky to put together a lap, but also final sector where downforce, you really want the car to be trimmed out. A good straight line speed is extremely important, as we see Luna starting to throw together another lap, as they were unable to really improve on that first lap. But this S section already looking decently put together, a little bit of a wiggle coming out of that Porsche. Big surprises through the S's. It tends to struggle with the front end. I think they might be trying out some tricks with that Porsche, trying to just trim it out, and Luna all over exit a Dunlop curb. We talked about that being a high commitment corner. You need to just stay flat out whether you think the car can make it or not, and unfortunately I think bit Luna a little bit too hard this time.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky corner, that one. An inch wide, it'll take you another 10 feet wide if you let it. You just really need to hug that inside as much as possible and just not hit that grass.
Yeah, very, very easy. You start to lose the camber very, very early in the outside area there, as well as Marbles, of course, picking up and throwing the car a little bit further wide as we jump on watching Denak here, who hasn't had the best first. Actually, I don't believe they're on an out lap as we follow along with them here. So Denak trying to just get some temperature up into those tires, but Ferrari looking decently compliant for that first lap out. Well, one thing to note is with 1.9, it does feel rather interesting that the cars seem to almost handle better on cold tires. But then the moment you get those tires up at temperature and in their window, they start to tend to kind of struggle. They might have a little bit more mid-corner grip, but they start to be very, very lazy. So it is one thing that I wonder if these drivers have noticed and maybe tried to take advantage of in some way with their qualifying sets. Maybe try to have a one-lap wonder set and maybe destroy the tire in that first lap, but really use the fact that that cold tire advantage is there. Or if we're just running race sets that are kind of applied with some quality fuel and see what lap time you can get out of it.
Yeah, 20 minutes of qualifying, you've got plenty of time to basically do whatever strategy you like. Personally, I would go probably about 4 or 5 laps of fuel first time around, see what I can get, and then just take all the fuel out I can. And if the car doesn't feel any better, I'll probably go back to what I was doing before, and then just try and push a little bit harder with the extra fuel on board.
Yes.
Yeah, no one really improving at the moment though.
Actually, I see a big jump up for Deeds right now as we roll into the final sector for them, throwing it into Spoon and a little bit of curb. They're just keeping a little tentative. We talked about Suzuka trying to take the lap time away, but Deeds is actually on a really strong lap of 4/10 already with 2 corners to go. If they're able to put this together and then some, they could be looking at up to P3 here with realistic time games, but my timing screen is going green as several drivers are now starting to improve with a mix of them at the beginning and at middle of portions of their lap as Deeds throwing it in, taking all of that curb. Once again, looking how compliant that Ferrari is over the curbs to the point it almost might be a fault, but the run to the line is true and Deeds is going to be pushing that pedal as hard as it can go through the floorboard. It is going to be an improvement, and it's going to be up to P4 with a 2-minute 1.292, just a little bit off. But then we immediately see Suzuka make an improvement with the 2-minute 1.1, just securing their spot in P3 just that little bit more. But it goes without saying there's a couple other drivers out on the grid. Kestrel's right now improving, and I believe the first driver on track that is seeing an improvement. And once again, we're seeing several tenths, but I think they're a little bit wide there through the hairpin. That's going to cost them a little bit as they are up against several tenths. They're going to be kicking themselves because this could have been another lap of the gods, but now it's just going to be about salvaging what you can. Looks like it's going to be about 3 tenths up once we come through that final beam, getting that sector 2 down, and it's all about Spoon in the final 2 corners to just keep it composed, put it together, and Kestrel's going to try to throw it in. We saw them struggle through 130R here, I believe, trying to take it flat. Well, it's 130R is next in line, so are we able to piece it together, keep it in track limits? Little bit of inside curb, kiss it, a little bit too much outside, yes, and that's going to be an invalidated lap. They're certainly pushing it all out, though. I mean, you can see where they've gotten this time because they've sent so many committed laps. But at the same time, with how committed they are to these corners, it is also the exact thing that is their downfall. So it's a tricky one here, trying to find a little bit of extra time onto what Kestrel's found with that 2-minute 7, because you basically have to throw the car in and hope it sticks.
Yep, maybe just a little bit too trimmed out on the downforce coming into the 130R. Just for me, it was just a little tap of the brakes just to get the front end. They will get another lap though, so currently floating around 0.1 up on their current. So maybe we'll up the 0.2 now. So yeah, there's still some time left in those tires.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a big improvement, hopefully, for Kestrel. I saw another driver was making improvements was Anka through the first sector. We'll have to wait till they get through sector 2 to see what's going on there. But another driver as well starting up their lap, and we haven't seen much of his newbie through. We haven't finished up sector 1, but I'm seeing a big improvement for them on the live timing, at least, as it looks like Kestrel's going to pull over to the side of the road. And then we're going to jump on board with Anka here, who's about level with their lap time right now. So it's going to be all about these final 2 corners. Very high commitment into that that turning point of 130R, throwing the car in. It's going to be all about the curbs, getting that traction down and power down very, very early. That Ferrari really excelling on that traction zone, and it's going to be a good exit from Anka, but is it going to be enough to unsettle Kestrel? Can they usurp that pole position? This is the final lap for every driver out on track, and it's going to be, I think, maybe a slight improvement, but it's nowhere near enough, as Kestrel is still leading by 4/10 nearly. But I want to jump on board with some of our other drivers. Suzuka Shark down in the back trying to put another lap time, but also way up front, newbie Nick has got a massive time. I saw for a moment they were looking at 0.5 of a second. So it's going to be all about these final two corners. We talked about it again. We've seen several of these drivers struggling with 130R, or maybe throwing it away in Casino Square. So this Casino Triangle could be a little bit too much, but no, newbie settling that up quite nicely. The BMW, quite a stable car in the front end, but a little bit deep. Newbie needs to just try to squeeze that throttle on, save as much time as possible, take that shortest line, as it looks like they're swinging it out, almost like they're setting up for another lap. Fortunately, the downhill run through the main straight is going to save a little bit of time, and it will be an improvement to P4 for newbie. As we jump back, Suzuka Shark is now an improvement. The next driver in line with another improvement. Will it be enough to challenge Anka? This is for the front row for the Blue E driver, and it will be the first for a while, and hugging that inside line, trying to take the shortest run, and a big improvement with a 2-minute 1 flat, and that's going to be P2 for Suzuka. But we still have another driver in the back. We have Denak as well, and Blazepine still finishing up their laps, and it looks like Denak's invalidated, but we jump over to Blazepine, looking like we have several tenths up, just the final corner to go. Blazepine was jumping, I saw about 5/10 earlier. It will be an improvement, but no, not enough to move them up. So it will be P14 for Blazepine, but they definitely started finding their footing that final section. I did see them lose a little bit of time, so maybe just a minor mistake, but oh boy, this is going to be an interesting race with how many little off tracks, little mistakes that we had coming out of some of these drivers, and how committed they needed to be to get that lap time. I think if we see any of these drivers getting pressure from anyone, it's going to be a very, very interesting race, because not only, first off, the dirty air from the trailing car, but the leading car needing to push to just make sure they try to keep that advantage coming through the rest of the track. So let me take us through our top three. Kestrel with a pole position, unable to secure all of the best sectors, as we saw Suzuka take the second best sector, but sector 1 belonging to Kestrel, sector 3 as well belonging to Kestrel. So very interesting, very low drag car, it looks like, with that Ferrari. But Suzuka filing in with that second place. Anka, our pole sitter from last week, sitting in P3, able to secure a decent finish. I'm sure they would have been a little bit unhappy getting usurped by Suzuka on that last run, but they're going to be trailed by newbie as well, who was able to put in a very strong time and actually usurp Deeds by 7/1000 of a second on that final lap. So very, very close for them. Denak, our last week's race winner, going to be down in P6 in taking that TGR second car to the third row. So not the best qualifying that we've seen from Denak. Denak typically very, very strong in qualifying and then manages the race, but looks like Denak's going to have to be working their way through the field, and what a track that they're going to have to do it on. Wishel with a slight improvement on their qualifying from last week, sitting in P7. So the start of the fourth row. Be very interesting to see how that Porsche handles through the S's. We talked about the mid-corner struggles. Be very interesting to see how they've gotten to grips. Oraz is going to be joining them on that fourth row in the 406 BMW. And that'll be a very interesting combo as well. Porsche versus BMW. Two cars that both struggled with top end previously, but now the Porsche, it's gotten a little bit of top end buff. That BMW is really going to have to rely on its downforce. Randomly on their first race back is going to be with us in P9. In limited practice, it's going to be a decent result for them as well. They're going to be joined by Dipping Sauce in the Lexus in P10 and recovering from what we found out was pedal failure last week. So a very unfortunate mechanical issue for them last week. They're going to be looking to bounce back. And that Lexus is struggling a little bit of a lack of downforce on that car. So Suzuka is going to really be a challenge for them as we roll through. That circle coming in P11 is going to be the first time we've seen this beautiful matte black blue and fluoro yellow livery, and it is one of probably the better looking liveries on the grid, if I'd have to say so. Actually, I think probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite. They'll be joined by Luna in the second 992 Porsche with that bright green, can't miss it, Porsche in P12. Paula Brady joining us for the first time in the Silver Championship with that Trans Pride. Mercedes-Benz sitting in P13. Mercedes seeming to struggle as Blaze Pine sitting in P14 as well. As they sit on those final 2 rows. That Mercedes not seeming to be the best car for Suzuki here, but it does seem to be a relatively strong car in the update. So perhaps in race pace, we're going to see these two charge through the field. It might be relatively interesting to keep our eyes on them as they start to progress through this event.
Yep, so Ferrari 1, 2, 3 on the grid. Suzuka, I think, will be very happy with P2. And yeah, TGR just kind of not showing up today. Unfortunately, it looks like they're having a little bit of trouble with setup, just not being able to extract the pace out of that Ferrari. And then newbie chucking that BMW right the way up the 4th in the second row. So it's going to be an interesting race. Not a Ferrari blowout, at least not after the first 3 rows.
No, not at all. I do think that the Ferrari probably just works its tires the best, to be completely honest, of all these cars that are working in. And that's the real secret. A lot of these drivers might not be really getting those tires in the window because it is now more important than ever this update. I have found that not only do you nail the pressures, but you really need to nail those temperatures. We talked about it in practice. And I think those Ferraris might just be able to get it a little bit better, a little bit more stable. It does struggle with the initial warm up, but once you're there, I do believe that it is a little bit easier to maintain those pressures and temperatures with the Ferrari. But it will be very, very interesting as we're starting to see the drivers settle themselves down for the final section of the gridding phase. So we're getting ready to start our warm up lap. And tire temperatures, the topic of this warm up, many of these cars struggling with their warm up. So this is going to be very, very crucial. Suzuka, very, very long pace lap. So it's going to be spending a lot of time trying to get that temperature in. But very important right now that while you're going to get the temperature into these tires, you don't want to overheat your brakes. If you glaze those brakes, you're going to be struggling coming into turn 1, and you're likely going to have to either lose positions by braking way early, let the car roll itself down, or you might be risking going a little bit too deep if you have those brakes in the red and going straight into the back of the cars in front of you. And stewards will not look very kindly upon that. So it's going to be a very tricky balance to find here as we roll on board with Deeds, just trying to get some of that temperature, and you're going to see brake lights flashing, popping up periodically as these drivers start to pump those brakes and try to radiate that energy into the core of the tire, which is really seeming to be what this new tire model is struggling to get working. The surface of the tire is not too bad, but that core temperature, probably the hardest thing, or it's probably the hardest it's ever been to really get that temperature into that tire. And then the low speeds here that we're going to have in the pace lap, it's going to be even more tricky to get that temperature in the tire without using that brake pumping.
Yeah, sector 1, pretty much a couple of corners. After that, you got about 2 corners the rest of the lap to try and get some heat into those core temperatures. Other than that, you're going to have basically riding the brakes the whole way around due to the amount of streets there is.
So it would be a relatively scary balance to try to keep those brakes in the upper end of their operating window, but not overheating them by the time you get to the race. And I think one of those drivers that are going to be trying to focus on that more than the rest is going to be Dipping Sauce here in that Lexus. Again, the Lexus, the car, it's a little bit down on downforce. That is just how the Lexus goes, but it is a straight line monster. So it'll be very interesting if that Lexus can get its tires working. We could see them look for a move in turn 1, or possibly just on the first couple straights that this thing can stretch its legs on. We might see an opportunity if you can hang on to the back of a car in front of you. It'll be very, very important if we can get those tires in the window. That Lexus, I think, will be in a very strong spot to start this race.
Yep, Lexus and the Porsche both naturally aspirated, so they're going to get the jump off the line. I think Michelle is probably going to get maybe be fearful of Dennock, maybe even catch Deeds by the first corner. The Ferraris are a little bit lazy off the start with the turbo lag, but once they get up and going, they're pretty hard to catch.
Now, on the topic of turbo lag, just for those that are unknown, if you would want to take us through that and how you can actually prevent that on the race start to help out anyone that might be new to jumping into this.
Yeah, I know in the Aston at least you could brake ride and pretty much hold the 70 kilometers an hour limit while on the brakes, which keeps the turbo spinning. Other than that, it's a really fine balance between timing it right, because if you time it too early, obviously you jump the start, then you get a drive through, and if you time it too late, you'll just get gulfed at the start.
Absolutely, and it's important to note too that you don't want to be getting a little bit too low, because then you're going to cause the car to bog, of course. Then you need to balance out both pedals very high in your traces to try to get that speed built up. It's a fine balance. I've done similar things in iRacing when my time with that. And it's a very, very tricky balance, but we are putting all the other sims aside and all that prep aside as we start to roll through the final corner, as we're going to start to roll the speed up to 70 Ks as we roll through this final corner, as we're going to take a look down this main straight, and you're going to just see nothing but Ferrari headlights on that front row lockout. The cars following in two lines in their grid positions, and it is going to be eyes locked on those red lights. We see Deeds peeking out, trying to look for an opportunity once those lights go green, and they're not going to go green until everyone's ready. And here we go for round 2 of the Silver Championship. Suzuka immediately filing out to the inside, trying to protect that inside line. Kesher with a good launch, and it looks like no one else able to make a big move, but Wushel actually trying to take him look down the car in the back round. It looks like they're able to get up one position. Deeds being filed onto that outside line, and it looks like most of the cars are going to be filed out. Denak, I believe, dropping a position as well. Yes, so it's going to be line astern coming through this S section. No one trying to take any big risks at the start of this 1 hour sprint race, but Wushel, the biggest gainer right now so far with that move up to P5 and immediately onto the back of that BMW. We can see another move coming from them later in the lap, but it looks like they're going to be the closest car on track. Deeds looking like they're under fire from Denak. Degner one, the move's not really going to work there, but Deeds able to file that out. Denak now losing a little bit of time every time we try to fight early on, especially on these cold tires. You're going to be losing even more than you would normally, and it looks like Denak has decided to start filing back. But actually, talking about another car, Dipping Sauce has started to move up the order as well in P8 right now. A big gain from them. They're already up 3 positions as we work through things so far. So that Lexus already stretching its legs, and it's going to continue to do so as well. As we saw in the background, I believe the Mercedes going side by side. According to my timing, that's filed back out. It's going to be a very fruitful race for this Lexus if they're able to hang on to the back of everyone. It's that Lexus stretching its legs side by side in the background with Luna and Dat Circle, and it looks like the Ferrari may be able to get the inside of 130R. No, having to file back in between the two cars. So going to be a very interesting race. A lot of ebb and flow throughout this circuit. A lot of places that cars are going to be stronger and get stacked up between each other, and then a lot of straights where those cars struggling in the corners are going to be able to stretch their legs. So keep tuned, as we got a very, very long race ahead of us and a very long straight ahead of our lead pack, as Wushel is starting to close in on Newbie, but unable to get close enough to get a move into turn 1. The draft helping that BMW pull away a little bit, or just stay far enough in front. And as we file things through, first lap led by Kestrel, then filed in with Suzuka Shark hanging onto that P2, Anka 3. Then here we're on the rear wing of P4 with Newbie and Wushel sitting in P5, able to get up that extra position on the start. And so we settle in for the long race, just try to get those tires in their window and settle down and really start to put this race together.
Yep, fantastic start from Wushel. 2 positions gained, 1 right off the start in Denak, and then in the turn 1 just showed Deeds the nose. Deeds had to jump out of the way, and Wushel up 2 places. And then we have as well Dipping Sauce, I think, is 2 places as well. Or is it just the 1 place for Dipping Sauce?
I believe Dipping was 3. They started in P11, and they moved all the ways up to 8th place. As well as looking the speed traps. My, oh my, that Lexus is fast. 261 kilometers an hour in the first lap. Only one other car matching that. But looking at throughout the grid, the lead pack, the Ferraris, 255. So that Lexus catches the tail end of any car, they have a very, very tall order to try to stay in front.
Yeah, and I think as well at the start, Blaze got I think it span on their hot lap, or sorry, their formation lap, and then basically got teleported back to the pits. They couldn't get recovered in time before the big game went. Nope, you're going back to the pits, old Sonny.
And it looks like they just disappeared off my timing tower, so that might spell the end for them. I can't exactly blame them. 2 laps down at the immediate start of the race. That is very, very painful without any safety cars or anything to give you that hope of recovery. As we jump on board with Denak trying to take that, I believe, bi-turbo powered Ferrari down to chase down Deeds up in P6, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit too far. That Ferrari sounding almost akin to a diesel engine. It reminds me of almost like a higher revving Audi R18 from the LMP1 era, an era that I very fondly miss. Very, very lovely cars, but it definitely is one of the nicer sounding cars, and I'm very glad that we've gotten to hear it in this new update. But Anka is hearing that BMW push their rear wing, and behind them they have a complete gaggle of cars as we see Wushel getting pushed by Deeds as well. Ooh. And it looks like Denak might be able to take the inside here of Deeds in the background as well. Coming through Degner 1, and it might be a move.
Ooh, big line of cars.
Yeah, all 4 of these cars line astern, and Denak wants to get a move on here. Wonder if Deeds is struggling with anything here, or if Denak has just gotten their usual tires fired up right away. And I think, yeah, they wanted to make a move coming into the hairpin, but now they've opened up for this Lexus to start opening its legs, as now Dipping Sauce pushing Denak through the hairpin, the exit, and here we can see that straight line speed already gaining on the short run to Spoon, as Dipping Sauce is going to try to take a look, but Denak has to go defensive, filing back a little bit, but Denak going a little bit wide due to that inside line. Dipping Sauce just need to settle down and put that power down, but that's what the Lexus struggles with, and exactly that is going to come back to bite them, whereas the straight line speed is the perk of that Lexus. You need to get that power down, and it has no traction, so its biggest strength is also its biggest weakness. Dipping Sauce having to just file back in line. And I think that was the first big opportunity for Dipping Sauce to try to make a move on this gaggle of cars right up front.
Yep. Dipping Sauce, very dangerous in that Lexus, especially coming after Boone Curve. I think if they had to get the power down, that would have been really interesting coming into 130R. But yeah, Newbie kind of catching Anka at the moment here. Anka dropping off the back of Suzuka a little bit. Suzuka dropped way off the back of Kestrel, who's out in front by a lot of cars.
Just quite a few, but one thing to note too, Speed Trap's Newbie, 262 Ks. I know that is with draft, but that BMW is trimmed out to no end. Only challenged by the Lexus, who has now moved up to a 264K speed trap. So that BMW is making a move. Anka's got a very tall order, really needing to stretch these gaps coming through the corners, but we haven't really seen much movement coming from any of the other cars so far. So I think we're keeping an eye on this BMW Ferrari battle, as well as that Lexus when they get an opportunity. I think that's going to be our biggest opportunity for any kind of position movement or the possible mistakes that we would expect coming through the rest of the grid. As we see Suzuka leading this group in P2, Kestrel completely unsighted as we roll through, and maybe trying to just close that gap, but I think Anka's finally got those tires in an operating window and is starting to just stretch their legs a little bit. Either that or Newbie's starting to struggle, because Wushel is now starting to get a little bit of progress, moving within half a second of the BMW.
Yep, Porsche definitely showing up a little bit better in the race, and it didn't qualify in. Wushel's going to be pretty happy with that. But will it have the top speed to try and get past the BMW? Probably not. But yeah, this is looking to turn into a great race between these people.
Absolutely, and I think this top group is really going to be starting to fight it out amongst each other. I mean, looking down the order as well, with the exception of Kestrel and Suzuka, we're looking at no gap, or actually, yeah, no gap bigger than 1.2 seconds. Every single person is line astern, so we're really got close racing here. A single mistake could see a driver drop from P3 all the way down to outside of the top 10. So, I mean, with a smaller grid, you absolutely love to see that, because while we have a smaller grid, we have all these drivers pushing each other one after another, so there's going to be no absence of excitement. And actually all the ways back down, that circle's now pushed up within half a second of Luna in that Ferrari, starting to put a little bit of pressure down at the back of the grid. That green Porsche just struggling maybe a little bit with that front end, or Dansuk really starting to get to grips with that Ferrari. But I, I'd struggle to see any easy opportunities for this Ferrari. It does seem to be a little bit weaker in the top end, so this is going to have to be a very, very hard-fought move coming from the Ferrari drivers. We've seen Denek try to chase down Deeds through this section and have no opportunity, even though they're so much stronger in the corners.
Yeah, absolutely. As well, so if we just remove Castrol and Suzuka out of the equation here, this is actually a pretty interesting race. But we do have those two out in front. Castrol about just from the fringes of 6 seconds in front of Suzuka, and Suzuka about 1.3 ahead of Anka. Other than that, they're all within a couple of tenths of each other. So yeah, it's a really interesting race in the mid pack.
Yeah, I believe Kestrel has started to harbor their inner Shane Van Gisbergen a second lap quicker every single lap. And then no one else is even matching that. There's only 2 other drivers that are in the 2-minute ones, and Kestrel is on a 2-minute 1 flat on their last lap. And previous to that, they had a 2-minute 1.03. So Kestrel's absolutely flying, dominating this race. They showed no sign of slowing down. As long as they're able to keep those tires in the window, avoid any off tracks. I mean, this is definitely a race where they're looking to try to dominate because that Ferrari looks absolutely hooked up.
Yep, they seem to have unlocked some kind of really magic potion for Suzuka. Definitely working for them in the race pace as much as it did in qualifying. But as we join the mid pack here again, twos and fro's from newbie, gaining, losing, gaining, losing. It's just this is the phase of the race that's just really frustrating as a driver.
It is a very, very tricky one as we roll through. I mean, 5 laps in, you're sitting through these drivers. You now have your tires in the optimal window for probably about 2-3 laps, but the dirty air is just fighting you every time as we see that BMW starting to gain on entry. But then look at this exit as the Ferrari's just able to just squeeze out a little bit more traction and really carry it through. With the front of that BMW so stable, able to roll things back up through the S's. I do be a little bit wide, yes, washing out. It's going to cost a decent chunk of time. It's going to allow Anka to breathe a little bit, start to put this pressure back onto Suzuka, as it looks like they've actually put together a very strong sector one, reeling in Suzuka by about 2/10 through that first sector. As we look back down the order as well, Denak is putting a lot of pressure on Deeds, and Deeds once again struggling through that first sector. Denak unable to find a move into Degner 1. Oh, a little bit of a wobble coming on the exit of Degner 2. That's going to really hinder them as they wanted to probably make a move coming to the hairpin here. One of the main overtaking opportunities on the Suzuka circuit, but Deeds is a little bit wide, and Denak might be able to put a little bit of pressure, getting the better run out of this corner. But Spoon is not an easy place to get an overtake. It looks like Deeds actually might have been able to get the better run out of the corner looking at our deltas, and I think maybe a little bit of TC interference coming in for the TGR driver, so that's going to kill their run coming out. But once again, these gaps are all just stagnated, sitting very, very close together. None of these are stretching, or none of them are coming very close together, so these drivers are all right on a knife's edge with each other.
Yeah, Deeds up onto the hairpin, I think, just went a little bit too deep, so it helped Denak, excuse me. It helped Denak close the gap a little bit, but then Deeds was able to get the car squared up on the power relay and get that time back.
And it definitely seemed like it paid those dividends, because that run to Spoon was very beneficial, as we see Randomly starting to put pressure on Oraz. First time we've heard from them this race. Randomly dropped down to 1 position off of the start, but trying to return the favor as Oraz is now without a draft. But I believe, yeah, that BMW is just, look at its legs as it runs away on the straight. That Ferrari, not the strongest car in the straight. It's not like the old gen Porsche where it struggles, but ooh, a little bit of a wobble twice from Oraz, trying to push that BMW through. A car that doesn't have the best rear axle, coming from experience, but it looks like Oraz just trying to hustle that through. Randomly really using the stability of that Ferrari to chuck it into these corners, and we can see that as the gap just closes through the S's here, and that BMW just needing to squeeze the power down. And it looks like coming through Dunlop a little bit tight. Looks like, oh, big slide from Randomly coming out. That's going to kill their run to Degner 1, allow Oraz to breathe a little bit once more. But that Ferrari looking so strong for every one of our drivers through Sector 1.
Yeah, BMW just washing a little bit wide and not being able to get in the power relay. That's the joys of a front mid engine rather than a nice mid engine that the Ferrari has. Plenty of weight over the rear axle. Nice turn in, nice traction. All the advantages the Porsche used to have. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's still Porsche at heart, but it doesn't feel like one. But I want to just touch base one more time because now Kestrel has broken into the 2-minute flats. He is a 2-minute .9. Well, by far and large the fastest driver on track, as well as last lap being a 2-minute 1.0 once again. Kestrel once again just flying. We aren't going to hear much from them later in this race, I imagine. Of course, imagining they avoid any trouble track limits, tire punctures, as we've talked about, plaguing the Ferraris last week, but this is definitely their race to command. We jump back through the grid. It looks like Denak and Deeds might be having a battle. Denak a little bit deep into the casino triangle. Oh, imagine that might be an off-track warning for the TGR driver. In contact between Deeds. Just a little bit of a touch. Denak able to hang on to it. Very well held, especially with how aggressive ACC's contact model can be. Very close to maybe a moment that could have spun the other two around. As we see the Lexus has also closed up that gap. Let's take a look at what happened here, how Denak got this. Looks like maybe a bad run into 130R. Deeds just unable to defend, but Denak very deep in, and Deeds taking all the inside curb and just washing wide. I don't know if the space was left there. That looked very, very tight from that angle. I'd have to see another, but Denak definitely trying to keep Deeds very tight on the inside, prevent them from getting back up the inside. And a little bit of contact, incidental maybe, but I'm not too sure. So we jump back onto the action, and Denak is right there once again, having to file back him behind through Degner 1, and it looks like Denak is on a mission. Coming up to the hairpin, the gap is 0.2 of a second. That is within the range of an attack. If you are committed, is Denak going to send it maybe half a look, but filing back in line? And once again, Denak having to file back in, but it looks like they're able to get the car straightened out earlier once more. This could be the run, but I think Deeds might have a little bit less rear wing in that Ferrari, just letting them stay in front, even when Denak gets a better run out of these corners.
Yep, Denak. If it was me, I would have given that position back anyway. And if I was either driver, I'd probably just let that one slide rather than submitting any kind of report. As Denak and does get past Deeds at Spoon. Nice undercut there. Nice over-under.
It looks like Deeds was running a little bit wide, as Denak's now going to take the inside, but no, Deeds is going to take it instead. Half a look. Denak is
on a curb there
from that outside. Yes. Well held there, as we've seen drivers lose that before on that curve. That curve can be very aggressive, but Denak now finally up and out of that roadblock that was Deeds. That's not to say Deeds was slow, but Denak was pushing them. And now eyes forward to Wuschel, who has been dominant at the starting phase of this race, but hasn't been able to make much progress after getting locked behind that BMW. Started to fall back a little bit. Well, they're going to need to start to get a move on, because Wuschel is now starting to get pressured by Denak on the lap times. So a couple of laps to go for Denak to get that gap closed. 2.1 seconds is the gap. We're definitely going to keep our eyes on that, because I would be surprised if Denak does not close that gap very, very quickly between the two.
Yeah, it looked like Deeds probably a little bit of a cork in the bottle there for the cars behind. Probably wishing the pit window was open so he could get some new boots on that Ferrari. But yeah, Denak now released and has already caught Wuschel by about half a second this lap so far.
It's going to be quite the challenge. That Porsche may be struggling with the tire, where much as it seems many of these new cars do, so maybe not gotten completely on top of that. That's one thing to bear in mind, as we see Anka going a little bit deep there. The BMW behind of Newbie also following, so not going to be much of a time loss other than the Suzuka up front. But talking about tire wear, I'd have to hazard a guess that Suzuka may be struggling with a little bit more tire wear than Anka, because Anka, even while going deep there, has continued to close that gap just a little bit more each and every lap. We're looking at about a tenth or two each lap. Actually, last lap was 0.2 on Suzuka. Maybe that comes as a consequence of this BMW putting on pressure on Anka, but Suzuka starting to get under a little bit of pressure themselves from their home track, if you'd have to imagine.
Yeah, I think are we seeing the Ferrari now at the phase of needing new tires, and the BMW is just soaking it all up? You know, look at me, look, I'm gentle on my tires. I'm not quite as fast, but I don't eat my tires for breakfast. Whereas the Ferraris just seem to be really running through them.
This is about the time last week that we saw drivers start struggling. About 20 minutes in, we saw our first pit stop as soon as that pit window opened, and it was, I believe, Deeds, that was our first one in on tires. So that we could see a repeat of maybe a Ferrari coming in very, very early and just trying to get some of that rubber to the road, some of that new rubber to the road, and get off of those worn tires. Is it almost feels like a graining phase on long runs
Yeah.
right now for many of these drivers, and you just have to work your way through it because you can't get that core temperature. So maybe once you have a higher fuel load, you can keep that core temperature a little bit better. The cars just putting a little bit more energy through it, and you can get it to work better. But that BMW, maybe because of the fact that it's front engine, keeping a little bit more weight on the front axle, it's working that core a little bit more, starting to get it to work in a better window, and it doesn't suffer from this, whether it be an actual grading phase or a faux grading phase where the tires kind of fall out of the window and then need to get put back in. I'm not sure, but Suzuka's still starting to actually almost hemorrhage time as Anka looking for a half move, but going a little bit deep and starting to lose a little bit of time. But even with that mistake, the gap's closing down to 0.8 of a second. Doobie just trying to hang in there. But this is starting to heat up a little bit as P2 is looking under threat from the TGR driver, as well as Newbie in this BMW starting to close that gap back up with those mistakes up in front. But a little bit of a wobble on the curb there, Spoon. We've talked about that being dangerous, and that could result in a crash there for Newbie if they're not careful.
Yep, Suzuka definitely showing a little bit of maybe front graining. Again, Anka the same at the hairpin there, just washed a little bit wide. At least from experience, if you don't have the heat in the core temperatures of the tire, you will grain your tires. The longer that goes on for, the worse it gets. So they really need to get on top of these front tires and the Ferraris. Looks like the BMW again with the front engine, the nice weight over the front axle. It just keeps the heat and puts the energy into the tires a lot better than the Ferrari does. But
I
right.
have to imagine the same thing is going on with the Porsche. Bushel is currently 1 second off of their best time, and the Porsche having even less weight over that front axle. So I'd have to imagine that any issue that the Ferrari's having is a big slide coming in from Bushel. Good catch. But that's going to be a lot of time as Denak's now going to be breathing down the tailpipe of that Porsche. And I'd have to imagine Bushel's starting to have to commit even more because the front tires of that Porsche are just starting to fall off. There is no weight over that front axle in the Porsche. All of the weight's in the rear of that engine, all the drivetrain and accessories are all in the back of that car. So I'd have to imagine graining way worse in the Porsche than the Ferrari here. And I'd looking at lap times, I would imagine that's the clue for what's going on. But to mention here, a minute ago, pit lane has opened. Your pit window has opened. One mandatory pit stop through this race. You have to make a fuel stop. And tire change is, I believe, not mandatory, but most of these drivers tire change is mandatory, but the fuel is not, excuse me. But most of these drivers will just take the equivalent amount of fuel that they can get in a tire stop. And that has to be done in a 20-minute window, starting from 40 minutes into this race to 20 minutes to go. If you do not do that, I believe it is a full lap penalty that ACC will apply in game. So that would be a 120-second penalty here at Suzuka. You obviously want to avoid that. So we're going to see all of these drivers during the next 18 minutes at some point likely come through pit lane.
Yep, Danak just showing us at the hairpin there. Wushel running a little bit wide of the tires. Danak seems to have a little bit more front grip at this time, and he is pressuring through 130R. Will he go for it into the casino triangle?
Yeah, it looks like Ferrari just is a little bit stronger through 130R as we see the Ferrari of that circle, going wide. Perhaps, I mean, we saw that circle behind Luna earlier. I'd have to imagine maybe that they were battling and returned that position after going so far off track. That would be my first guess, just thinking off of where they were previously. But we have several drivers here. If you look at the timing tower illuminate red, we have 4 or 5 drivers that are all within half a second of each other. So battle's really starting to heat up. Oh, very deep for that circle, picking up a little bit of gravel as they start to fall back. But also another driver, Wushel, still falling back even more up the grid. We got a 3-car gaggle, wide, and Deeds is going to sneak through as well. Denak inheriting that position of P5. I'd have to imagine that Porsche is absolutely destroyed its tires by now because Wushel is struggling with the front end massively. You don't get an off very often through the S's there. It's normally a very gentle section where you're just trying to maintain front grip, but that looks like a catastrophic loss of front grip to be that far wide through the second corner of the S's.
Yep, I would get that car in and get a fresh set of boots as it, and another big slide coming out of Degner 2 for Wichelle. Now under pressure from Dipping Sauce, who seemed to be stagnating a little bit there behind. I think they were behind Orals, but seemed to be getting past them, I think. Or were they just ahead, maybe? And maybe I'm confused. Wouldn't be the first time.
I believe Dipping Sauce has just kind of been sitting in P8 since the start of the race. Yeah, they're only up 3 positions still, as we have dropped down to 12 of our starting 14 drivers. So they haven't benefited either from anyone else leaving, but I do believe this position is going to change very soon. We saw a little bit of a wiggle there from the Lexus, classic Lexus, as it just moves the rear end around. A lot of torque in that engine thing. Sounds like a NASCAR from onboard as it chases down every single person you can put in its sights. It looks like it's worked. That Lexus might be the best car in the long run. And if I had to admit, we're seeing Dipping Sauce still within 2/10 of their best lap. Everyone else has fallen almost a second away from their best lap, with the exception of our race leader Kestrel, who is 3/10 off of their best lap, who's managed to keep that Ferrari in quite a nice window. And I think is the only driver in this Ferrari group that has managed to get those tires working in a nice window for this entire race. I would struggle to believe that it's anything else with how consistent that car has been all race, looking at what these other Ferraris have been struggling with.
Yep, now 12.5 seconds to the good to Suzuka, so no tire issues up front for Castrol. Did we see no Rochelle goes for another lap? That's surprising to me. I would have got that car in and got a new set of boots onto it, and maybe played a bit with the pressures a little bit to try and get some more heat into the front.
Perhaps trying to push all the ways to the halfway point. I mean, if you're struggling right now, if you're sitting in as a driver, you know that you're struggling at this moment right now, and you pit 5 minutes early, it's only going to be worse at the end of the race. You're going to have maybe the 5 minutes normally at the end of the stint. Well, now you have an extra 5 that you got to tack on to after that. It's going to make it even worse. Yes, you can make adjustments with your driving style and maybe ease the tires in a little bit more, focus on keeping that core temperature a little bit better. But if you're not confident with that, I'd have to imagine maybe this is Wushel just trying to go for a little bit of damage limitation, knowing that the tires are off the cliff, but just trying to make it to that halfway point of the race. As we see Newbie trying to make a move around the outside of Spoon, that's not likely to happen. Going in Anka defending the inside of the corner, but it looks like Newbie might be able to get a better exit coming out of the exit of Spoon here, a little bit wider, allowing to put them that power down earlier, and we can see them starting to close up a little bit more, and we see a massive gain for the BMW driver. Half a look on the inside as the Ferrari's a little bit slow, but good front grip, having the lift because of the run being too big, and Newbie having to settle through Casino Triangle one more time, but a little bit defensive from Anka. That's going to tighten up their line. This will open it up through the main straight, so Newbie was able to put that power down a little bit better, get a little bit better run, and now the long downhill run on the pit straight, and TGR is going to have their work cut out for them as Newbie starting to take a look down the inside, and the confidence has been there for the BMW, but not able to get the overlap. Anka holding around that outside and able to hang it, but are they able to carry the momentum? No, maybe not. But they're going to have the inside for the first left of the S is turn 2.
I thought they were going to try around the outside there.
And it looks like they wanted to, but I think it was just too much too late. It was the BMW was never going to hang it around the outside there without a massive speed advantage for them. But it's still, you can see this BMW is just massively strong relative to the cars around them, especially this late in the stint. I would not be surprised to see Newbie go late in the run, maybe pitting around those 20 minutes left in the race and really extending the end of the pit stop timer and making sure that they can stretch that clean air, because their pace right now seems massive, and Anka really struggling at the front end, going deep into the hairpin again, and it really seems like the ABS being very, very intrusive on that Ferrari, and Newbie taking advantage every single time that we roll through and just carrying that momentum so much better.
Yep, you can see Newbie just throwing the nose in, just make Anka go offline. That's the attack you need. You can't just sit behind and expect them to open the door for you. You need to start showing them the nose, putting them offline, getting their tires covered in marbles. That's how you gain positions.
Yeah, we see the occasional headlight flashes coming in from the BMW, trying to just get in the head of Anka right now.
Ooh.
Oh, a very, very big lift coming from Anka. This might open the door for Newbie. Half ascend, releasing the brakes, and we could see inside move coming in from Newbie side by side through Casino Triangle. Newbie trying to hang it around the outside. We saw Tears come here. We saw Deeds and Denak come together, but Anka finally saying, all right, that's enough. You've lost me my time, but I'm going to drop you on my teammate Denak, who's been on a charge, and this could open the door for Denak to get a little bit closer. 4/10, it might not be enough, but Newbie now under pressure from the second TGR car. I wonder if a little bit of team tactics there coming in. I doubt team orders, but Anka might have been looking in the rearview mirror or that Delta to see that Denak was here, didn't want to hold them up, came in, and Denak is now pressuring the BMW. The Bavarian machine is trying to just stretch its legs, but the Ferrari once again trying to make the S's work. It looks like for once the BMW now leading the charge through the S's, starting to pull away from that Ferrari, and that has to be that tire advantage that we've talked about all race. Halfway through the race in 40 seconds, so by the end of this lap, we're going to see most of our drivers hitting that halfway point, possibly a lot of pit strategy coming in, but Denak now the man putting pressure onto that BMW. The hunter has become the hunted.
Yep, if I was Newbie, I wouldn't be pitting this lap. You're just going to put yourself out behind Anka again. Just try and get as much lap time in as you can. You're going to have to put the laps in before you pit to try and get started. Because Anka's going to take 2-3 laps here to get the tires up to temperature. Yours are up to temperature. Okay, they're a little bit faded grip-wise, but the heat's still there. You still have the lap time in the car. Put it to use.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen the run come from that BMW, so I think on the straights it's going to be relatively safe without a mistake. The Newbie just needs to hold it together, and they should be in a very decent spot. But that Ferrari, I think Denak still has the confidence under braking. Maybe not the ultimate grip through the S's when you really can lean on the limit of those tires, but Denak still very strong, holding within a decent margin of that BMW. So we could see maybe if a mistake comes from Newbie that Denak closes that gap and puts them back under pressure again. No, Denak actually is filing into the pit, so there's that halfway point. We have seen 3 drivers pit, and actually Kestrel, our race leader, is one of them coming into the pits. We're going to see them stop nicely in the pit box. Very quick stop. It looks like they're able to get things going relatively quickly, and Denak, Deeds, Wushel all filing into the pits. So we got Wushel, as we suspected, trying to close in to that halfway point of the race, just a little bit of damage limitation, and now Suzuka inherits the lead. I'd imagine they won't be out there for too much longer, but Suzuka doesn't seem to be struggling too much from that tire, where within half a second of their fastest lap time, and they've just started walking away from the group that was behind them that they were previously getting run over by. Perhaps maybe got those tires back in the operating window, worked through that greening phase a little bit.
Yep, as we just see, Kestrel's just finished on their pit stop now and have left the pits, so they've only lost 2 positions with that. That's how far ahead they were.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, some of the drivers behind them have also pit as well. So this is our effective race leader at Kestrel. Everyone else ahead of them does still have to pit. But this has been a dominant performance for the first half of this race for Kestrel. No one in sight for them after the first 15 minutes. So just needed to hold it together. We could actually see a little bit of drama, though, if we can't get those tires back in the operating window. We have seen tire pressure mistakes. We have seen fueling mistakes come in. Just thinking back to the AM Championship, we saw Zara actually last season, final corner of Zandvoort, lose their race in the final corner of the final lap. So just bearing that in mind, this race isn't over. Kestrel does need to make it to the end, but a driver that has put themselves in a good position for the end of the race, Denak, who I believe also pit now 1.2 seconds ahead of Anka, and was able to actually stretch that advantage, which I believe the overcut, and keep ahead of the TGR teammate of Anka and starting to make a run up the field. It would be interesting to see how our 3 cars that haven't pit come out, as Suzuka is now on our timing tower as coming in, Newbie Nick as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how the gaps work out here, because Anka was actually fighting these 2 cars as they come in, and now Denak's going to be inheriting that battle immediately. So this is going to be all 3 of our final cars coming in to serve their pit stops. Dipping Sauce has decided to file in as well. So our race is going to return to its normal state. All strategies are going to be playing out. We're going to be following Kestrel coming down 130R, throwing it in, easily going to overtake the other cars. They've just stopped in their pit box, and all his Kestrel has to do is run down the pit straight. About a 30-second minimum pit stop, so that's just the time to get the tires changed. If you are taking any repairs, you might see a little bit of optional on top of that, but I believe all the drivers that came in were not involved in any contact, so I'd be surprised with any of that. See Kestrel coming back, inheriting that lead, and of course there's no one else on that pit exit to take anything from them as well.
Yeah, it looks like Denak has actually got past Anka in the pit stop, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see if Newbie comes out in front of both of these. As Newbie has now, sorry, Suzuka has gotten ruling, and now Newbie has indeed gotten ruling. And they do indeed come out in front.
Suzuka might have lost time, though, as we saw
no.
in the background. Newbie is filing right in between the TGR cars, and Anka has to file in right between, but Denak has jumped both of the cars in this battle on the pit strategy. So Denak is able to get those tires fired up right away and actually take advantage, as Newbie has just been undercut by the TGR car, and Anka was overcut. So Denak making a strategic masterclass here. Now they're starting to put pressure on Suzuka, who has to get those tires up to temperature. Anka with these tires up to temp, and Newbie needing to just file that BMW in between. This is the phase where the Ferrari is the strongest, so Newbie has a massive job cut out for them to try to hold it up front for the rest of this race.
Yep, cold tires, cold brakes compared to Anka, so it's going to be a very hard kind of first lap. A little big slide there from Newbie. That's not what you want on brand new tires. You want to keep them under control. Otherwise, you're going to start spinning them up, blistering them and graining them, and everything that they don't like.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be the fastest way to green your tires. Blistering would be coming from that overheating, which I mean, we could see that coming in, as it is still a relatively warm day, 30°C, but I think tire temperatures are mostly under control on the hotter end of the scale, but we still need to get the tire temperature into them. So we could see that graining coming in. Really big is a big understeer moment from Anka, and then a kick over the curb, even a bit of oversteer well held from the TGR driver, as that... Oh, that was the curb at Spoon that we talked about, had the potential.
It looked like they just clipped the grass on the way into Spoon, and that just kind of unsettled the car.
And that was a very, very well-held moment, because that could have been race-ending for Anka there. Very easy to find yourself in the barriers on the far outside of Spoon there. Fortunately able to keep it together through the runoff, but that might be the advantage that Anka had on Newbie disappearing, as Newbie is now going to be close to within their temperature window, but Suzuka up front, losing 3/10 to Denak behind, as Denak is on a charge. The tires should be in their optimal window about now. It should be the third lap of Denak's stint. Suzuka only lap 2, so we could see a lot of time get carved out here. But one thing to keep in mind, Denak struggling on the straights versus the other cars. So very, very likely that we're going to have to see a very audacious move coming from the TGR driver and our championship leader to try to make this move for the second place on the podium.
Yeah, Suzuka looked like they maybe lost a little bit of time in the pit stop, because they were 3.3 seconds ahead of Newbie when they came into the pits. So yeah, something maybe a little bit of off the blocks there. But yes, Denak now really, really pushing to try and close up the back to Suzuka and go for that second place.
Yeah, we saw a lot of bouncing there through Degner 1 as well, so perhaps a more stiff carve coming from Denak. That maybe that aided with firing up the tires a little bit more. You start working them a little bit harder as less of the energy is absorbed by the suspension. But Denak definitely on a charge here regardless of setup, as they've already closed in 2/10 on this lap alone on our P2 position. And then we have Newbie behind, who's starting to catch pace with Denak and starting to recover some of that time that they would have lost from immediately coming out on cold tires. So this race for the podium, it is on and it is hot, as we also have Anka now caught back up as well to the rear end of that BMW. So 4 cars all vying for the final 2 positions of the podium here. This could go any way. Any of these cars have the potential and race pace to take this position. And you also see in the back there, Deeds just cresting in the background, just looming in case there's a big incident. Multiple of these cars go off. That podium position could also return from P6 all the ways up to P2 or 3.
Yep, I'm just trying to take a look to see if we can see anywhere any warnings for track limits, but I don't think we have that kind of information. So at the moment, we're not sure if anyone is close to getting a drive-through or not. But yeah, looks like Suzuka maybe going defensive a little bit too early there. But Just run your race. Don't worry about the car behind. They have to find a way past you. You don't have to find a way to let them past.
Yeah, I don't have anything from any warnings, but we would see anything pop up if there was a track limits penalty, any drive-throughs or anything, but I'm not seeing anything in our logs for any kind of warnings. So I'd have to agree with you on that, but look at this. All 4 of these cars, 4/10 line of stern, perfectly gapped between each other. Of course, as soon as I say that, Denek ekes out an extra 10th on Suzuka, but very, very close between these drivers. I talked about them all being on a nice edge. I mean, admittedly, 4 of them. Ooh, big moment from Suzuka. It might have to be defensive coming into the hairpin. Denak trying to send that audacious move that we talked about earlier, but unable to get it going, but able to look inside, get the car straightened out earlier. This could be the run in the spoon that Denak needs, but again, I think the TC interfering as Suzuka is able to get a better run out and falling back into the 4-car gecko once again. Denak unable to make that move, and that has to be so crazy frustrating to just every single lap get a better run and just not be able to use it. 0.2 of a second coming through spoon. Denak is absolutely pushing this Blue E driver through every single corner, but Suzuka is just dealing with it beautifully. As we look through 130R, Denak taking half a look inside. The Suzuka taking all the turn. Denak washing wide a little bit late on the turn, and that might make them susceptible to Newbie. Then having to take defensive line. Denak defending here, but Newbie on the inside. We saw them try to make that side-by-side outside. Anka, and now Anka's going through. It's going to be TGR. First TGR trying to make the move on the BMW, and Newbie now has their work cut out for them, but Anka has the slipstream. So the BMW is under threat and under pressure right now. We saw Anka defend on the outside, but now they need to attack. Can they hold it around? And on the edge of the corner, Anka able to squeeze them. A little bit of a tap, I think. And Newbie trying to just hold it. But we go around the outside through the S's side by side. Anka just trying to take the inside as we file back through. Once again, another corner filed side by side. The BMW and the Ferrari just equal on every single corner, trying to eke out every advantage they can. And I think Newbie finally able to edge ahead. A little bit of minor contact coming through turn 1 and 2, but all is fair in love and war, as Anka now trying to take a look into Degner 1, but not able to get a move fully in there. Oh my, a lot of respect from these drivers to be able to hold it side by side through that S section. That is extremely challenging no matter what category you're in.
And that's just cost them 2 seconds to the guys in front. Yeah, that all started at the Casino Triangle, with Newbie taking a bit of a look on Denak. And then Anka just got a better drive at a Casino with just a tighter line, nice drive, just got beside the BMW, and then after that it was just side by side for half a lap. Absolutely. So take a look at the replay here.
And side by side, we can see the cars are level, so that tells you how much commitment Anka needed. There wasn't an overspeed. Oh, a little bit of tap on turn 1, and then coming turn 2, a little bit of understeer, but Anka coming in a little bit, so just a tiny tap, but oh my, that was a...
I think that's fair. That was Newbie was there. You can't just expect him to disappear, so I think that was fair.
I think that's just classic GT racing, and if it was touring car, we wouldn't even bat an eye at that. That would be a very normal day in the office. But I think even GT cars, that is par for the course. We see plenty of GT cars rubbing along, as long as they aren't taking each other out. Nothing wrong with that for sure. But we have also seen Suzuka start to stretch their legs a little bit on Denak, as Denak's now going to start to have that door open to take more aggressive opportunities, since that gap has opened up to 2 seconds with Newbie dropping back. Even though it's closing, Denak has the ability now to take an aggressive move that Newbie tried to do, but actually lost out. If Newbie had to be cautious with that move that Anka eventually took advantage of. Well, Denak doesn't have that same danger put on them right now. So if any time that you're going to send a big move, a very audacious send that's going to open the door for a car behind, you need to do it now. You have 1.5 seconds, or sorry, 1.8 seconds to the car behind. Well, this is your only window you're going to get with how tight we've seen these drivers be, especially since Suzuka is starting to hold up the rest of these cars behind. You don't have a lot of time until they catch back up and limit your options again.
Yep. Denak's just going to have to dig deep and just send it. I think Suzuka defending pretty well, not putting the car offline or anything like that, just trying to make Denak go the long way around, which is what you need to do. There's no point in defending too early and running your different lines. Just stick to your own race, and then that'll make it hard for the guy behind to pass you.
Absolutely. You need a lot of commitment here, too. And we've seen with the Ferrari, since they struggle with the front end grip, that's basically all you need for that outside move. You need that front. You need to be able to lean on that front corner. But we've seen Newbie now 0.8 of a second pulled back. And that means Denak's going to be under pressure, but they've lost a decent bit of time here as they see Suzuka running off in the distance. Coming through 130R, you tip it in. A little bit of curb, well put together for Denak. Maybe a little bit tentative as we heard a pretty sizable lift coming through 130R. Oh, the curb coming in through Casino Square as we see the first curb eaten by Suzuka, but a little bit cautious on that second curb. Denak deciding to take all of it, and that might have been where they gained all that time back, as it looks like they're starting to make a charge back up. They had lost about 2-3 tenths, while all that time is gained back up now. But Anka is starting to push, or sorry, not Anka, Newbie is starting to push back up to Denak again. That gap closing into about 1 second. So I told you that window is closing, and it is closing fast because Suzuka is not able to get the pace that they need to keep Denak safe, and that might actually work in their favor here because they're just fast enough that Denak can't really make a move. So if they just play it safe here, get that pressure, group back up from Newbie behind, this might mean that they can solidify that P2 position because Denak's not going to be able to make a big send unless Suzuka makes a major mistake in which they both plug the road, much like we saw Newbie and Anka coming through the S's a few laps ago.
Yeah, you can see there just watching the two line differences between the cars. Suzuka taking nice wide lines through the S's there. Denak keeping a little bit tight, probably trying to use a little bit of that tire life to try and get a little bit of gain of time on Suzuka, but Suzuka just running their own race at the moment. As we see right up behind, a little bit of better traction there from Denak. Newbie definitely catching, but Denak looks like maybe a little bit of a look into here to Spoon.
Yeah, it looks like Denak might finally have the true run as we look for a half move inside, and it could become a full move coming to the inside of Spoon. Denak with no, they back out of the send and lose a little bit of time on entry. Suzuka just keeping that momentum rolling through the Spoon curve, and you can just see how much they can pull just by having that better line. Well, that door is officially closed now, if you ask me, because Newbie back within half a second. So any move you make needs to be calculated now, as Denak just trying to fill the mirrors of Suzuka right now, but Suzuka is not budging an inch, but they move a little bit wide. Both Ferraris going a little bit wide. This could open it up for Newbie, who does have that window open. Anka a little bit far back, and the lights flashing once again. Newbie trying to just get in Denak's head and try to open up an opportunity, because that BMW has not had a strong one all race, but 0.4 of a second, the closest gap we have on track. Newbie might be able to make something happen as that gap continues to close. Denak closing in on the Ferrari Suzuka, so this is going to go to the end. Even if one car gets past, you still have 3 more that are going to get involved here, so I would be shocked if we see this resolved anytime soon.
Yep, I think Denak maybe a little bit too eager to get past Suzuka there and put Newbie onto the back of him. He just needs to just hold it for a little bit longer, get the proper line, get a nice run. Try to go through the nose through 130R and then had to put the brakes on. That brought Newbie right back into it.
But Newbie has lost a decent amount of time through the S as that double dose of dirty air has been pushing that BMW back a decent bit. Denak seeming to deal with it quite well, perhaps keeping the front ends in a decent window as we see 3/10 coming into the hairpin again, maybe a little bit too far for a move, but coming into Spoon, we've seen how good Denak's been at putting down that traction. Maybe a run coming through there, but it looks like no, Suzuka's actually gotten the better run coming out of the corner. So this might have to settle in one more time. Denak's going to have to follow through Spoon. Maybe we see a run to 130R, but frustration, the heat underneath that helmet is certainly building right now as Denak, opening up the corner as best they can to try to open it up. And ooh, Suzuka's got a mountain to build right now to try to keep all 3 of these drivers behind, because this is 12 minutes of battling. And this is 12 minutes of stress for any of the drivers in the middle of this pack, because they could be looking at a P2 here. Best result for any of the drivers in this group, excluding Denek. Our championship leader has gone a little bit wide. We see Newbie going around the outside, able to draw ahead. Going into Casino Triangle, Newbie around the outside for the first section. Are you able to put the power down? The BMW trying to squeeze it in a little wiggle, and Denek able to edge back ahead. The front engine nature hurting that BMW, unable to squeeze the power down, and maybe a little bit of contact. So we see a possible warning coming up on our timing tower there. But that BMW once again just unable to squeeze the exit speed out, and Denek holding ahead. And that pressure is opened up the gap for Suzuka. And now the back 3 cars of this group is all battling for position.
Yep, that was definitely a move Newbie needed to try and make. Just Denek just kind of opened the outside line. It was a nice move, but it just didn't come off in the end.
As we're gonna take a look here,
Denek just a little bit tap on the brakes. Or gets a little bit unsettled through a 130R, and that opens the door for Newbie to try and send it. Definitely had a little bit of overlap there from Newbie, but the traction of the Ferrari just beats it out.
And there was that contact right at the end of the replay there. We saw a very, very minor, nothing that I would write home about, that's for sure. It might leave a little bit of a memento in the car of your competitor, a little donut on the side, if it was wheel to body panel, but nothing bad. Certainly what I would expect to see, but that was a very, very big slide coming in from Denek. I would be amazed if that somehow did not destroy the tire of Denek. So we could see a little bit of damage done to Denak's pace after that. I mean, that rear right tire would have been screaming. So this track, I mean, being a figure 8 track does give that rear right a little bit of relief. It allows that rear right to cool down through the right-handers, but now that weight's moving in that rear left, well, Denak's still gonna have a little bit of damage done to that tire, and it could see a little bit of hindrance of pace, but Newbie also falling back. We might also see a tiny bit of damage on these cars as well with the contact, the quite physical nature of this GT driving. If anything, if it's going to have been done to Newbie, he's fallen back a little bit. Suzuka taking a little bit of a defensive line to the inside as Denak's trying to take a look, and not close enough. So the Bluey driver once again leads into turn 2. Denak's trying to put the pressure on, build it up, but all the way from 2 to 5, the pressure's been there all race long, and it has just been absorbed brilliantly by Suzuka, and Denak's just trying to get closer and closer. The pace is there, but Suzuka does not care at all, and we roll through the S section. It is just so well put together from the Bluey driver, opening up that gap. About a 2/10 advantage through Sector 1, while Denek needing to close this again. This is where Denek has been strong, though. Sector 2, Degner 1, 2, the hairpin. Every time they want to throw it in, a little bit more committed, a little more curb, and we see that time gain right there coming into Degner 2. Able to put down the power, maybe a little bit better exit from Suzuka. But coming into the hairpin, Denek once again loves to dive here. Suzuka a little bit defensive, but we draw alongside. It could be Denek trying to put down the power a little bit earlier, but Newbie now trying to take a look up the inside. Suzuka getting the better exit, and once again being able to drive away from Denek even better. And now Newbie back in range to put pressure on. Remember, this is the battle for the podium. These lead 2 cars are P2 and 3, so any of these drivers could end up with a very, very strong points haul, but this also could all end in a disaster. You get a little bit too greedy, and this could end with you sitting at the bottom end of the group.
A little bit slow there from Suzuka. Sorry, out of spoon. Don't know what happened there. Maybe a little bit TC kicked in, but Denak's right on the back of them now. That's not where you're going to pass. A little bit of grass took on the way in. Maybe Suzuka's going to run wide. Doesn't. No one everyone keeps it in check. And Newbie, a little look on the inside there again.
Pressure once again building. I mean, it seems more and more common that Denak's able to put more and more pressure on this Bluey Ferrari. In the number 10 starting to struggle a little bit through the front limited sections of the track. I mean, we've still seen good lines coming from Suzuka. It just seems a little bit of time loss. Newbie taking half a look into turn 1, but too far and too late, as I believe that BMW is going to lose a little bit of time offline there. But Denek once again hauling, just able to get the car over so much earlier. The compliance on the front axle of that Italian machine is just so much better right now. They're able to hook up late in the run. I mean, we have 7 minutes left. I mean, been 23 minutes on this tire, and they have still able to just get the car to throw into every single corner. Dunlop corner as well. Talked about this being a very high commitment corner. Well, it looks very, very easy for both of these second and third place Ferraris, and coming again through Degner 1. Denak just gaining a little bit once again, trying to go on the exit of Degner 2 and maybe about equal on that exit, but every single time the commitment required on these old tires, you have to imagine one of these drivers is going to slip very soon. Denak trying to look for the over-under, a little bit of minor contact. Suzuka able to get the run out even despite that, and that's going to open up the gap a tiny bit. I wouldn't imagine there would be any damage there. Very, very light touch, but that's just going to make Suzuka look in their rearview mirror just a little bit more. Might unsettle them, make them worry about what's happened to their car.
Yeah, nice defensive line and just parked it on the apex. Had to make Danak kind of check up a little bit. You don't really want them running the back, but oh, big run here from Danak. It's such an overspeed.
I believe a little bit of rubber banding there too, though.
Yeah.
Suzuka able to get that run out, but yeah, a little bit of rubber banding. That's what those cars are doing when they're flying forward and backwards, is the drivers' connections are just a little bit different. I mean, we have two drivers on opposite ends of the world here, quite literally. So no shock that we're seeing a little bit of ebb and flow on their speeds there, but still the minor contact, but that does kill Denak's run coming through. A little bit of a touch. Well held, though, from Suzuka, as we have seen incidents like that cause race-ending crashes before. And Newbie is now the one putting pressure onto Denak. I'd have to imagine maybe ACC might be putting a little bit of damage on the front bumper of Denak now. That's two contacts that have been caused by the number 54 TGR driver. Even if it's 2-3 seconds, even 3 to 6 seconds, the Ferrari doesn't seem the best car to deal with damage, much like the McLaren in that respect. So this could be working in Newbie's favor. This could be a podium opportunity for the BMW with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, and just coming through Dunlop there, you can notice the sun getting nice and low, so that's going to be playing another factor in what the drivers see. It might just nullify any attack Danak has into the Degners, and as we see, Anga going a little bit wide in the background there.
Yeah, it's going to be another big dive, but it actually looks like Denak might have lost some of that braking confidence coming into the hairpin. It looks like they were still able to get a better exit, and Suzuka once again starting to get reeled in by the TGR Ferrari. That gap has been so small all race. You'd have to imagine that they got a room ordered with how close they've been all event here. But Denak is just not able to get the front end of that Ferrari again. So I'd have to imagine right now that seeing the handling changes of that Ferrari, even though the pace is there, it does look like there might be a tiny bit of damage on that number 54.
Yep, definitely hard to see in this light, but Danak a little bit wide. Newbie goes a little bit wide behind him. Oh, it goes down to the inside. He does. It's a bit of a half commitment there from Newbie. Not going to work out unless you're really side by side.
And perhaps trying to stretch the gap, though. They were able to get Denak to take a very, very shallow line in, which is going to let Newbie open up that corner, put that power down earlier, maybe take an opportunity. Newbie, I think, trying to get temperature in those tires. You talked about the sun lowering and maybe changing these conditions. Well, the temperature has dropped from the start of the race by 3-4 degrees from the start of the race. So this could be playing into the hands of the BMW, which seems to have had those tires working a little bit better, but it's a very tricky situation because we just saw Newbie themselves trying to weave and get temperature into those tires. So very, very interesting to see how this is playing out. But I want to just touch base on this real quick. Kestrel with a 2 minute and 3.9. Oh. This front group is a 2 minute and 3 flats. They are pushing the pace. As we jump back down the grid real quick, a possible movement for Suzuka, unable to make advantage of that is Denak, as we lowered the cap to 1/10 of a second. At the moment, I think they were even through there. As Suzuka parking it once again. Denak, I think, trying to set up the exit and might have been able to put the power down a little bit nicer. We've seen Denak get good runs coming here into Spoon. Good possibility that we see a look here through the slipstream and opening up the door into Spoon when we straighten out. Is Denak going to send a high commitment move, looking to the inside, forcing Suzuka a little wide, but this is where Newbie can set up a run big snap of oversteers. They try to adjust for the speed difference up ahead, but the rear end just moving everywhere on that BMW, unable to put the power down, looking like a Lexus in that respect. And the gap now between Suzuka and Denak once again back to 0.2 of a second. One mistake is all it takes, and this podium battle could be out of order. Suzuka giving that mistake a little bit wide as Denak coming around the outside, coming to the casino triangle, trying to make it work. Suzuka a little bit deep. Denak with the cutback. Then we try to hold it around the outside, going through the final corner. Denak having a good run and a hard touch. Suzuka going wide into the grass, and now Newbie's trying to take the advantage, going down into the main straight, and this could be Newbie's chance at P2, a big run going around the outside. We see Anka make a big move here, but now in TGR, Newbie makes it around the outside into turn 1. Extraordinary stuff, as we talked about. One mistake could throw both of the drivers out.
And Denak smartly let Suzuka. Sorry to interrupt you there. Denak smartly letting Suzuka pass there. That was all fair and love and war from Newbie. He didn't do anything wrong, so he's able to take both positions.
Yes, but we talked about that. The one mistake, that's all it took, and this battle was going to be completely shaken up. Well, we saw Newbie take advantage and also going a little bit wide there. I think Newbie had a mistake through Dunlop, but Denak now putting the pressure on Suzuka once again. And we could see all manner of things come through here. I'd have to imagine there was some damage from that. This is a relatively rough hit, but Suzuka's confidence definitely going to be shaken from that tap from the number 54 as we maybe look defensive. Oh, and a big hit! Suzuka's destroyed the rear end by Denak as Anka sneaks through. Deeds even sneaking a position underneath there. Well held by Suzuka to not put that in the wall and regain the grip, but Denak is everywhere, and I would have to imagine the front end is gone on that 54, both from damage and the tires maybe falling off, because that 54 is everywhere right now.
Yeah, and Suzuka probably has diffuser damage as well, so just going to be a little bit careful coming through 130R here. There might be a little bit edgy on the rear end, but yeah, both Anka and Deeds going through there as we're going to try and take a look back at this incident between Denak and Suzuka into the hairpin.
Worth noting, that was the last lap of the race. We never were given the white flag for Kestrel, so that was going to be this is the final lap. This is the make or break move. So we see Denak pushing Suzuka very hard through here. Suzuka going on the defensive line immediately out of the corner. Denak a little bit late, trying to send a move, but unable to account for Suzuka taking that defensive line, and that's going to be the loss of that podium, and Deeds inheriting P3 from that, or P4 from that Anka P3, as we see a very kind of controversial and physical finish coming in, as Denak has had multiple contacts there at the end, but oh my, Kestrel with a dominant P1. Newbie inheriting the P2 with some late race carnage, and Anka in the back end of that 4-car group. P3, we talked about it, the back end of that group was kind of in the catbird seat. Deeds as well in P6 getting promoted, or being promoted from P6 to P4, and Suzuka bringing home another P5. Gonna be very, very disappointed with that, seeing as they were running in second all race, but consistent from last week as they were P5 as well, as Kestrel losing the rear end, trying to showboat a little bit as they returned to the pits, but then P6.
Unfortunately for Kestrel, the fight for P2 is a lot more interesting than being 27 seconds out in front, as we see Paul then crossing the line in last place in 12th, so only a couple of points for her.
Yeah, Wushel going up to P7, right where they qualified, if I remember correctly, so a decent result from them as well. I believe the rest of the order, Dat Circle, Oraz, and Dipping finishing out the rest of that top 10. Luna as well, and yeah, P11, then Paula P12, Randomy, and Blaze unable to finish the race. Blaze with that start of race issue, and then we were unable to see what happened to Randomy, but unfortunately they were unable to finish the race. But all in all, I mean, my oh my, what an exciting race. My voice wasn't able to keep up with that, but at the 4-car battle for the P2, I mean, that was on the edge of your seat stuff all race.
Yeah, you can't help but feel a little bit sorry for Suzuka. They had P2 pretty much in the bag, and then Denak decided that it just wasn't to be, unfortunately.
I mean, very unfortunate stuff. I mean, you would expect some chaos like that to happen, though, with how physical they were racing. I mean, every single lap we had something going on with either a defensive move, a mistake, or some kind of attack, whether it be a half a move just to move someone around. Every single lap we had something going on. So it's really unfortunate, but sometimes that's racing. It's the unfortunate and ugly side of racing that sometimes someone has to come off worse. Respect to Denak for returning those positions, but those mistakes happen. I would rather have very hard, physical, and exciting racing, and maybe those incidents creep in every once in a while, than have us sit and have a very procedural race. And no one's really battling each other. So props to the P2 through 4 cars who were battling all race. Very, very exciting, and definitely was enjoying watching them for as long as it lasted. Unfortunately, that last lap didn't end how people would have wanted, but again, that's racing.
Yep, like we say, just unfortunate for Kestrel, they were just too far ahead to actually be of any interest to us on stream. But they do take home the win. I think then we have a tie maybe for P1. We'll have a look at the results, but I think it's going to be pretty close in the standings now for first and second.
I believe after that result, it will be Kestrel will be 1 point behind, actually. Kestrel finishing P7 last week. And with none of the races coming after none of the post-race penalties coming through, that's going to stay solid. So Denak will be leading the championship by 1 point right now, with Kestrel immediately behind. And from there, I mean, the Anka is going to be the most consistent driver with 2 second places. They're going to be at about 40 points, if I'm not mistaken. Well, the lead group will be around low 50s.
That is, of course, depending on any penalties that shall be received between now and the next race.
Yeah, absolutely. These are provisional results, so it is important to note that that these results can change. So we shall see. There is plenty of things that can happen before next week, which I'll keep updated through the rest of the championship and get a graphic working to help out everyone as we roll through things. Other than that, thank you all. This has been round 2 of the Simufur Championship. Please, if you have not done so already, feel free to join our Discord or follow our socials. That should be down in the description below as we continue with these races almost every single week of the year. As long as we have a championship running, there's a 90% chance that we are streaming it. So with that said, please come and join us if you would like to race, or join us to follow in with the community. Other than that, my name has been Plasma, and I am signing off. Thank you, and see you next week.
Yep. Have a good week, everyone. See you later.